working perfectly fine. Yep. Sure. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, my respected professionals, students and friends from across region, uh, assalamu alaikum and a very welcome to Miswaak Live. Uh, if you can hear me loud and clear, you can drop a like, thumbs up in Zoom, and a comment section or Facebook here. You can comment that okay. Um, okay, fine. You can hear me. Now, thank you all for taking the time to join us today. Your presence reflects a shared interest in understanding how public institutions and private sectors can work together responsibly, transparently, and to deliver long-term value to our society. It is a true honor for us to host today's session, which focuses on public private partnership, a subject that lies at the intersection of governance, development, law, economics, and increasingly technology. Let me introduce our guest today. Today, we are deeply privileged to be joined by Mr. Harold Sullivan, JD. Mr. Sullivan is a public-private partnership, legal, institutional, and transaction advisor at Osana International Inc. He brings with him decades of hands-on experience, having worked across multiple countries, institutions, and complex PPP projects, advising governments, stakeholders on the full life cycle of public-private collaboration.
Print.
Okay, so before we go into the presentation, I want to set some ground rules here. We kindly request all our participants here in Zoom, as well as whoever is watching us on Facebook Live, kindly remain respectful and professional throughout the session. And this is learning focused space, so questions, curiosity, and thoughtful engagement are most welcome. The session will consist of main presentation followed by a dedicated question and answer segment. So I hope you hold your questions until the QA portion. Now, with that, let me invite our speaker. I will share his slides from my end. Before that, Mr. Sullivan, it's your floor now.
Thank you very much, Rehan, and I look forward to hopefully provide a smooth presentation that gives a bird's eye view of public-private partnerships.
Okay, so let me quickly share my screen with Mr. Sullivan's presentation. So whenever it's required, just please call me to change the slide if you think it's done.
Okay.
I hope my screen is visible now.
Let me see. Okay. Okay, next slide. Whoops, second slide. Next. Okay. I want to focus on what I have been working on the past few years with developing countries from Pakistan to the Philippines, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Maldives, etc. But I've noticed a recurring theme, and that is that it's good to have an overview right from the very start so that this can get on the right track. So these are the presentation topics I would like to discuss today. The objective of this presentation, development prerequisites, And then the age-old question, why not public procurement? Why do we have to learn a new system and develop all these? I think I've answered that, and I'll be discussing it. But first, I wanted to go through what the 4 phases of PPP project development are, all the way from the identification of a project to closeout. The last topic will be what happens when you have disagreements even after the project has a signed concession agreement and project close. Okay, next slide. The purpose of this presentation is to focus on the competitive tendering of well-prepared PPP projects in a transparent and fair manner. The 4 phases are provided in the following slides. I just wanted to tell you that in all fairness, most of my experience is on large-scale transport projects, particularly roads and airports and toll roads, etc. And I've had 20 years of private sector experience, 20 years plus working throughout the region. And then I'd like to kindly ask how many of the participants are public sector officials and how many are private sector executives?
So with that, I can see half of our Zoom joiners are public service related and half of them are private sectors. Few students are there joining from Facebook Live, and some of private sector professionals also joining in Facebook Live.
Okay. Have any of the participants received or are they pursuing a PPP certification program?
I think that's a question for our guests, for our joiners. If you are pursuing any PPP certifications, you can unmute yourself and respond to the question.
May I come in?
Yes, please.
I'm Aliajum Alajat, Director, PPP Authority. I have completed 2 certification, CP3 certification, foundation and preparation, waiting for execution.
Okay, like the ADB and the World Bank are both recommending programs of studies that lead to certification. Is that the path that you're on now?
The ADB is organizing this program. They are providing support for achieving this certification. And I have completed from one from Singapore Management University and waiting for the final supporting by ADB.
Okay, good. Okay, I've worked
Harold, I have also completed PPP certification program, APMG certified certification program, and I have completed all 3 parts: foundation, preparation, and examination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a good start for a long-term career path, and I wish you lots and lots of success. So only one person has acknowledged that they have to be, they're pursuing a certification. Okay, next slide. Now, a lot of people seem to have trouble with this. They want to focus in only on public-private partnerships. But my experience over my entire career has been that you have to have certain development prerequisites that are embedded in your system. You have to have a well-functioning legal and regulatory framework for PPPs, including the um, including the implementing regulations to go along with it. And the second prerequisite is you have to realize there are two key institutions in this overall program, and that is a PPP office that I had worked for a couple of occasions, and an implementing project implementation or project management unit. I forget the terminology that's currently used in Bangladesh. Capacity building. I think you've started already on that, but I'm saying that that's a prerequisite. You have to have an ongoing capacity building arrangement. And one of the last things, but by no means least, is to stimulate private sector interest in this. A capable private sector party will already know what your particular project is because he's looked at either the multilateral agency financed grant projects or some other way to cover the development cost. Okay, the next slide.
Public procurement.
Rehan, if you want me to pause at any time, I'd be happy to. But I've lost a picture. I've got Abdul, Mohammed Abdul. Okay. Why not public procurement? Well, I worked as a government procurement lawyer for a long time before I even entered the realm of PPP. And the answer to that frequently asked questions is a public procurement costs more, and typically it is late in its completion. The UK Treasury reported that 70% of publicly financed projects, not PPPs, were delivered late compared to only 20% of privately financed projects. 73% of those same projects were over budget compared to 20% of the projects done without the agencies. Australia PPP projects generated cost savings of 30% and were completed on average about 3.5% of the time. They were much more efficiently done. They were open closer to the promised days of opening, and appraisal optimism is the words that you hear the multilateral agency talking about. One of the difficulties that they encounter if it's going to be borrowings from the country is appraisal optimism. In other words, as they're preparing the project, they tend to make things a little bit rosier than if it was done with PPP. Now, after the UK and Australia did theirs, they took a lot of criticism because it didn't include enough examples from the developing countries. And when they changed or expanded the analysis to include the developing countries, they found out that the situation got much worse in regards to cost overruns and late deliveries. So over the last 20 years, the general consensus is that PPPs are a great way to get the private sector involved, to pay the expenses associated with building the facility and other matters. It's almost a given that public procurement is being replaced by PPPs. Okay, next slide, please. Now, why is that? Publicly financed projects where the government either provides the money to develop the facility or to borrow money from one of the multilateral agency finance entities, but they take all the risk. If it's going to be a typical government procurement project, all of the risk falls on the public sector, as shown by this slide. A typical PPP project divides responsibilities to the entity that's best able to control them. Yes, you have public sector finance responsibilities for force majeure, right of way, political risk, etc. But the private sector, excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cold. The
Absolutely
private
fine.
sector is responsible for all of the things that it has the ability to control best, like the design, construction, and an analysis of demand and financial aspects of the project. So this is one of the reasons why public procurements end up costing more and are late in delivery. When I said that I was a private sector executive for a company that was $100 million, we grew rapidly from a small company of 5 million up to 100 million in just a relatively short number of years. Private sector competitors will know this project very well. In fact, in a lot of cases, better than the government sector, government public officials that are handling. So they're aware that the key thing here is demand and financial. Oh, excuse me. Got a little bit of a cold there. Okay, next slide. Here are the key differences that I see from a typical public procurement project versus PPP. You'll see the topics on the left side, and then what is involved in the public procurement and what's involved in a PPP. In summary, the government or the government financing for the people, for the public's use, comes through a public procurement. But private investors, the firms that are competing for this project, will have to provide the all of the funds necessary to bring that project to completion. On detailed technical specifications are not the responsibility of the concessionaire. There is a concession agreement. Private investors are responsible for any cost overruns from the demand analysis that they made earlier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some people ask me about performance bonds. Well, you've got them in public procurement, but on a PPP, it really is, it depends on a variety of factors. Okay, next slide. Let's go back one. Okay, so let's, just to get our, we all know what a public procurement is. I think anyone who's been working in a developing country, one of the first things they have to cope with is, how do I get this thing from tender to award? A public-private partnership is completely different. It's a long-term risk-sharing contractual engagement, typically through a concession agreement that's awarded by the authorized public sector entity to the highest evaluated private sector party, usually a consortium of firms. Now, why do you need consortium members to adequately compete for PPP? Because typically, from my experience, which has been that most of these larger scale transport projects or airport development or what have you, have the capabilities only if they're in constant contact with, and eventually they work out an arrangement whereby the funds are isolated and paid for in various segments.
End of the contract period. Period.
Okay, I couldn't quite hear that. But okay, remain. Okay, so by the way, normally on one of these introductory slide presentations where I haven't worked with the officials or the private sector executives, I tend to give very succinct, very specific presentations of this nature. In your case, what I'm trying to do is, by making it a little bit more wordy, hopefully it will serve as a model for future projects that you may want to work on. Okay, next slide. Now, this next chart shows the main thrust of this presentation. That is the 4 phases of PPP project development. Okay, next slide. These are the 4 phases that are shown. Rehan, I've got Mr. I've got someone else on this line now. If you can put me or you back on the screen.
Are we expecting somebody to join you, sir?
Okay, that's okay. I feel more comfortable. I feel like I'm talking to somebody.
Yeah. So we are absolutely hearing you, and it's like unbreakable attention to your presentation, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. After 20 years of doing this, I struggled to understand what was a PPP, and through the years, I've developed this chart that makes it like a roadmap of how to get from where you are to where you want to be. There are 4 phases to this. The first one is the project identification, assessment, and prioritization. It's a pre-feasibility study. You've often heard that mentioned. It's the process under which it's not a full-blown demand analysis. It really depends upon the interest at that stage. If you've got someone knocking on your door wanting to talk to you about a project that's going to be tendered next year, that might be okay. But it's part of what they're doing to keep aware of a rolling target, so that when it comes up, they've got the construction firm, the management, the marketing, etc., that makes up each one of the PPPs. So that's phase 1, pre-feasibility study. Now, in the case of Bangladesh, my final report was very complimentary to the government for the way in which they've set up the PPP office. They've got it as a sufficiently high level. It reported to the Prime Minister when I left in 2017, and it is a comprehensive report of about 16 months that I had worked on the project to help develop the identification and the assessment through the pre-feasibility study. Okay, I'm going to go through these other 3 phases shortly, but right now let's go. And some things happen concurrently. Indonesia was really embarrassed to see that they had successfully carried out the transaction, except they forgot the land acquisition process. So I made sure that's on here. Stakeholder consultations, keeping the citizens, the future stakeholders involved in the process. And there are 2 warnings signs that I want to provide to you after my experience. One is that when you go from phase 1 to phase 2, there's an enormous risk there. Typically, the PPP office, through the CEO or someone senior on his staff, will have agreed with the line ministry that's proposing the project that it be done a certain way. It has to be, the assessment has to be analytical. Why? Because the things that are required in phase 2 are so expensive. You've got to do all of the work that development agencies typically do with the public procurement. You've got to detail the nature of the project, what part is public sector, what part is private sector. In other words, it's a process that when I was working cost on average about $1 million to do the appraisal. In other words, so it costs a lot of money if you approve what's in phase 1. That is, if the PPP office supports the projects, the project implementation unit is enthusiastic and wants to do it, and you've got an indication that there is keen private sector interest in the project, then you've probably got a project that is going to go. On the other hand, if you've had no interest from the private sector, the line ministry is not very enthusiastic about doing it, it's probably not going to be approved. So there's a big break between the public, between phase one and phase two. Now, interestingly enough, when I talked to a colleague of mine in preparing this thing, I told him that the project preparation phase would typically cost $1 million for a project that was 500 million in total cost or above. And he looked at me kind of funny and he said, well, that must have been several years ago. And I said, why do you say that? He said, because for a project $500 million, it now takes $2 million to do. So there's big money involved in that. The money to prepare a project that's been approved for implementation is typically not paid for by the government. They're not going to do that. They're not going to advance the money to do a speculative PPP. But if they have other ways, which Bangladesh and other developing countries have, like to ask for support from the ADB to provide needed technical assistance to undertake the project. There was, and they do that for Bangladesh, then it makes it a lot easier. Now the ADB is asking to be appointed as the project manager, or I forget the title of it, but 6 or 7 years ago, excuse me, 6 or 7 years ago, it was not the ADB contracting out, but by the ADB being appointed by the developing country to go ahead and do the total cost for X number of dollars. Usually they're very cheap. The third way, and the way that I had started out when I first started doing PPPs, is at the time of closing, the competitively selected private sector party will reimburse someone, typically the government or the financing agency, the total accumulated cost for the preparation of the project. Any question on that part? Or do you want me to?
Guests, you can ask any question during our session. You can unmute yourself and question directly to our guest speaker, Hal Sullivan. He's speaking about PPP project development, extensive international experiences. Any questions from any guests here in Zoom as well as in Facebook Live? So far, so good. Okay. Okay. In that case, Hal, you can continue, please. No questions?
No questions. Okay. Oh, okay. But if you do have any questions, please speak up, particularly as I get into phase 2 and phase 3.
I think Abul Bashar sir has one question. Sir, please go ahead.
Oh.
Ask your question.
Hi, Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you for hearing you after a long time. This is MD Abul Bashar from PPP Authority, Bangladesh.
Yes. Glad be talking with you again.
Thank you for your nice presentation. But I have a little bit caution in Bangladesh perspective. Is phase one, you rightly identified, is PPP project identification and prioritization is pre-feasibility study. Very important. But you know, in Bangladesh PPP guideline or PPP law, there is no provision in pre-feasibility study. That is why PPP authority cannot help any implementation agency, and there is no extra fund in implementation agency. That is why we are so suffering to identify the real project in PPP. What is your suggestion in this regard?
Okay, again, can you just go over that question again to make sure that I understand what you're asking me?
Yeah, I want to say pre-feasibility study is very
Yes,
important in identification phase.
yes.
But in our rules regulation in Bangladesh PPP program, there is no provision to help and introduce that type of study. And implementation agency, there is no fund in pre-feasibility study level. So
Okay,
we are suffering to identify the real PPP projects.
okay. Remember at the beginning of this discussion, I talked about the need to have a development prerequisite in the legal and regulatory framework that's necessary to do these projects successfully. Yes, a pre-feasibility study at that time wasn't, when I was working in Dhaka, wasn't excluded, but it had a procedure in there that I thought was very effective. And that is, if you've got the PPP office and the line ministry project implementation unit, and you've got an indication of private sector interest in pursuing this, then you've probably got a project that is going to be relatively easy to make a full feasibility study in phase two. It's just there are tricky parts in that we'll talk about later. But does that answer your question? In other words, in 2017, which is the last time that I worked in Bangladesh, the regulations were very clear. The lines of authority were very straightforward, and the CEO or one of his senior advisors would be making the case to the appropriate approval body that this is a project that's been identified, it's been assessed, and we think we should go with it. So hopefully that can be expanded during phase two. Okay, next slide.
Thank you.
By the way, and from my experience, without exception, a potential project that is supported by the recommendation of the PPP office, the implementing line ministry, and indications of private sector interest almost always gets approved for competitive tendering. So phase one that we're talking about now is the identification and prioritization of prospective PPPs. Where does this project get identified? Well, ideally, the identification would come through stakeholder consultations, speaking in a group format with concerned citizens who want, for example, a safer, more efficient airport or a toll road or whatever. So most of the time, the projects that have those kinds of prerequisites gets approved. There are other ways, and that usually involves a private sector, a large firm that is proposing that the government uh, consider developing this particular facility. It is important to remember there are two uh, weaknesses in the PPP project if you have uh, both a firm that is trying to go on an unsolicited basis. In other words, it wants to be appointed. It wants to be the concessionaire. It wants to be uh, the winner of the tender without a competitive process at all. That's not the way to do it. The other thing to be aware of, the government support, financial or otherwise. If the private sector party sneaks in to his presentation parts that give him a distinct advantage, like a brand name. Well, you have to buy the engines from Rolls Royce in the UK, etc. That's an indicator of a project that is doomed. I need to take a 2-minute break and I'll be right back. Rehan, can you take over for a second?
Absolutely okay, fine. So you can take your break now. While
Okay.
Sir Hal Sullivan is on his quick break, let me recap for those who have joined recently. Warm welcome, and you are attending Miswaak live session. We are honored to be in discussion with Hal Sullivan, with our distinguished guests, like the government high-ups, Bangladesh government high-ups, mentioning joint secretaries, additional secretaries, deputy secretaries are have spared their valuable time to join our this session. I really, from the bottom of my heart, please accept my gratitude. Also, our friend and colleagues who took the initiative to join the session today is really appreciative. This session, the purpose of this session is to share knowledge with the professionals as well as the new joiners, and how the AI is affecting the industry. So as we go forward, we will ask such questions to our speaker today, and we will also have a dedicated question and answer session for our honorable guests who joined today. Please have your pen and paper ready with the questions. You can ask questions, but mentioning that our speaker, Hal Sullivan, is, the speed. So let's have a relaxed speed when we speak with him. Maybe on his side there is some audio problems. That is one possible reason could be there. By the way, so far what have Harold Sullivan shared with us, is there any discussion points from our audience in Zoom? You can mute yourself and talk.
Okay. So what is a pre-feasibility study includes? It describes the technical aspects, the financial, legal support requirements, and other aspects of the proposed PPP to determine potential attractiveness to prospective private sector bidders, and the application of IBN screening tool. I don't know if they still have that or not. Okay, next slide. Okay, phase two. Next, phase two. Before we get into phase two, I want to reiterate that there are a couple of crossroad decisions that have to be made. One is whether or not there's a sufficient preliminary determination made of the project's attractiveness to prospective bidders. Includes the big money for tendering a PPP comes from the need to do this phase two correctly. One of my old bosses that I worked with in USAID and eventually was appointed as the ADB representative for Indonesia was that he always called a PPP not a public-private partnership, but a properly prepared package. And he used that expression, and it seemed to resonate with a lot of officials, and he reached a conclusion. So you have to recognize that once you make that critical decision to go from phase one to phase two, that is, it's been approved by the entity that is responsible for analyzing and saying, yes, it's approved, or no, it's not. That is an important objective, and you have to have it worked out so that you have the ability to pay for the needed services, either through staffing or through technical assistance that you get, or otherwise. By the way, phase two project preparation is one of the first tasks that I had in the 1990s here in Indonesia, helping as a bid document specialist. And effectively, I had to create all of the documents, like all of the documents that could be given to the interested private sector parties that have been shortlisted. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Okay, next slide. Phase three, project transaction, is very much similar to public procurement. It's handled in a similar manner, but the documents end up with a draft concession agreement. The government is going to propose that this document be the business plan as to how these two entities are going to work together over a period of anywhere from 5 to 30 or more years. I've worked in Bangladesh after I finished the PPP office assignment, I had worked on the Dhaka Chittagong Port Elevated Expressway. And it was a very complicated, very costly road project to build. And I think it was handled very well. And that's included in the final report that I provided to the ADB in early 2017. You're entitled to these documents that the ADB has simply by asking. Usually there's no problem, but if you want a final report on the PPP office, the way it operates, that final report will tell you. In the preceding project, let me check my notes. Okay. The Chittagong Expressway, same thing. It had to have a concession agreement that was a term of more than 30 years. The term is usually indicative of how much money the private sector has to put into this project out of scarce government resources. And all the other responsibilities will fall on the concessionaires. Okay, that's a project transaction. Now the next slide is line ministry or PIU or whatever other name you want to use. Must be fully operational, in place, with well-qualified public sector officials to do project monitoring throughout the term, which leads to, at the end of the concession agreement, the transfer of the asset back to the government. Its responsibilities are much more in the realm of with the nature of the project. A PPP can be anything from the Dhaka Chittagong Expressway all the way down to hospitals, which I've worked on in Bangladesh, educational facilities, etc. So the PIU's responsibilities for the long term kick in. Now, you don't have, let me go to the next slide. So the external documents, the ones that the private sector bidders are going to be looking at before they decide to bid or no bid, is an expression of interest for the pre-qualification application. This is a document that explains the qualification of the major parties involved in the consortium. It is an opportunity for them to tout their qualifications, their experience, and their successful delivery of PPP projects, perhaps in other places. So, and a draft concession agreement. It doesn't mean that it's a firm document. It means a draft, and it's one that can be used on multiple projects. Now, in the pre-qualification application itself, the responsibility is going to be on the prospective bidders to clearly show that they have the qualifications to carry out the project. They will be analyzing that in the context of how many people are interested, a lot of subjective factors that prospective bidders will evaluate in determining whether or not to submit a pre-qualification application. Once the government has all of the pre-qualification applications, it's going to be making a short list of somewhere between 3 to 5 pre-qualified bidders. Pre-qualified bidders are going to be invited to attend a pre-bid meeting, and they will receive copies of all of the documents above. People just applying for trying to make the short list, but they fail, they will not be provided all of the documents that a shortlisted bidder will have at his disposal. Okay, next slide. Now, you know, someone in DACA once made a statement that made me understand the nature of the following parts. And he said the signing of the concession agreement is the beginning, not the end of the negotiation. On a day-to-day basis, you're going to have the PIU, the line minister, and the lead firm team leader, or whatever that person is called. You're going to have differences. And those differences are resolved amicably in about 75% of the cases once they get fully discussed and a resolution is reached, then all parties continue. If that doesn't happen, then you've got provisions within the concession agreement that calls for arbitration and venue and the rules of engagement. That is a process that it mirrors what a civil trial would look like in many cases. It's not going to happen very often. I've only encountered a couple. A better way of doing it is through non-binding mediation or binding mediation. Next slide. Okay. This has been a broad brush approach focused in on the 4 phases of PPP project preparation that are contentious, they're difficult, but if they're done in a transparent and fair manner, then they will eventually work itself out. Is there any person any participant for today's presentation working on the Dhaka Chittagong Elevated Expressway? Is anyone working on that? Can you provide us an update of has it been awarded?
Indeed, I know about that project. That project has been cancelled and it has been wiped out from the PPP pipeline. So it is not a PPP project at this moment in our country context. Thank you.
Really? Okay. Do you know what it is? Is it a regular government procurement now?
No, government is still undecided whether they will do it or not. Sometimes the government thinks they need the project, sometimes they think they do not need the project because there are also a high-speed rail line. So once upon a time, it was a competitor of this project that if we develop the high-speed rail line, then we do not need that road structure. Again, the high-speed rail line has been cancelled, so it is still undecided whether government will go for a big investment like this railway line project, high-speed rail line project, or elevated expressway project from Dhaka to Chittagong. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm always interested in what's happening in Bangladesh. I loved working there. I'm now at my personal residence in East Java, and one of the things that I like to show off are a lot of the things that I brought back from my time in Bangladesh. Okay, we've used up our hour. I've got a lot of ground to cover, or I have covered a lot of ground. Each one of those presentation topics could be the source of a full day's presentation if you were going to do this in a long-term manner. This is like an introduction to what an experienced American lawyer and international advisor on PPPs would look at when he was thinking about whether or not to assist governments to accomplish their objective. So we've tried to cover a lot of ground. You can use this slide presentation for future reference to figure out where this roadmap to success is. Remembering the key points are that first, you've got to have clear approval from a project to move from phase 1 to phase 2. Why? Because it costs you a lot of money. Number 2 is you want to be cautious with unsolicited proposal, which typically involves a non-competitive selection process and guarantees that the government may or may not want. So those topics and that type of discussion are going to be unveiled to you as your career goes on. I had several preliminary questions, and one is if you're just beginning in PPP, where would you start? Well, I would start by looking at what projects. I would look under that final report, which shows you there's an orderly process in Bangladesh for the processing of these prospective projects. Other countries have not done the same. They've made key mistakes. They have cost their government a lot of money over a long period of time, but that should be the exception and not the rule. Okay, I'm leaving my contact details here. If there's anyone who, through Rehan, wants to ask specific questions that are perhaps not appropriate for open discussions now or whatever. But yes.
Yeah. So we are slightly over time. If it is okay, we can open question answer session because we really want to hear from the government officials and the engineers. They spare some time, and came to join your session. So now, very quickly, I would request my honorable guests who joined today, starting with I would try hard to maintain the seniority, which Basha sir, if you are here, can you unmute yourself? Oh, maybe he's drop off. Okay, going to Najmus Sada sir, Joint Secretary to the Finance Division. Sir, can you speak? Unmute yourself and ask any if you have any questions, comments, concerns.
Okay. Thank you, Raihan, for connecting me with this presentation with Dr. Hal Sullivan. It was definitely very nice for me as I am working with also a PPP project to BREB, Bangladesh Rural Electrification Board, to identify a project. And so it is very important to listen from expert like Hal Sullivan. But the issue is that we understand that in Bangladesh is just in terms of progression is slowing down. So I would like to know what are the countries' experience, especially if Dr. Hal Sullivan can tell about Indonesian case, whether PPP project is slowly growing its number or it is just in static in nature along with other country example, if you can, to encourage us showing those data and information around the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Najmus sir, for your insights. Now, I would like to hear something from Ali Ajam Ajad sir. If you have any comments, concerns.
Yes, first I want to thank Dr. Hal Sullivan. This is the opportunity for me to hear from him like expertise. And for you who organized this program to attend me in this session, and I hope if you are arranged in future, such kind of programs will be enriched with the knowledge from such kind of expert, especially for international good practice. What are happening in around the globe? Can we implement such kind of experience in our country for the betterment of this development? And we will be privileged if we get him in future any session with experience of country, similar country like Bangladesh, to employ their expertise in our case. Thank you very much for listening.
Absolutely. Got your point, Adat sir. Would really like to hear something from our engineer, Nahidul Islam. Few words.
So it's a very nice nice talking with Mr. Sullivan, and also his experience, his working experience around PPP projects in many countries, and also presence of my respected SARS in PPP authority. So my question to Mr. Sullivan is regarding the engagement of private sector, because I work with in both platform, from viewed the private sector from public offices and also from other way around. So how to reduce the gaps between the PPP authority and also the private sectors during the feasibility state of any particular project? It will be an interesting thing to get notes from Mr. Sullivan.
Okay. Rayhan, can you help me a little bit on understanding the specific? I want to be responsive to every question. I'm happy to do that. But you said the question is how to narrow the perspective between the public and the private sector? Was that the question?
Nahid, if you can yes.
It is something like that, because feasibility state means one important thing we do miss. to engage with the market like that way. So the feasibility reports usually conducted by some transaction advisors, and they do their own channel to establish some communication with some potential bidders. But from institutional perspective, from PPP authority perspective, is there any potential suggestion from your side to do a broader engagement with the private sector before while conducting the feasibility study, that can better reflect in the bid documents and also the contractual obligations? That is my
Okay.
perspective.
Okay, I got you now. I would respond to that by saying that it's going to take some working together and a common interest before the development of the short list. It's okay to talk, in my opinion, through the head of the agency. It's got to be the spokesperson. It could be the PPP office. It could be the project implementation unit at the line ministry. It could be a lot of different ways. But I think it's okay to fully vet this out. And if there's any, for example, in the Dhaka Chittagong project, the main problem that we were facing is how do we independently assess the need for this elevated expressway and whether or not people would be willing to pay for these types of additional public services. By the fact that it's not going in PPP direction now, I'd have to wonder whether there was enough work done long ago to alert the private sector to this upcoming opportunity. In other words, without having more specific information on what the private sector may be looking for, it's very difficult to anticipate questions. Demand and the cost of paying for that facility was very difficult and required a team of people actually on the road talking to people. And this was before the short list was developed, of course. But there's a lot of proactive work that can be done on the part of the government that should make this project go much smoother. Transparency and fairness are the cornerstone, two of the cornerstones for a competitive procurement. If you're not transparent, if you give an indication of not being fair, you're going to dampen appetite and people won't want to work with that agency. And I'm telling you that as a private sector guy who spent most of his life. Our company grew because we knew that we would only work with a transparent and fair agency that was conducting this. Well, it wasn't a PPP in those days, it was government procurement. I hope that answers your question. If not, we'll get it next time.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you. With that note, sir, if you allow me, one small question I really want to ask.
Sure.
How do you see artificial intelligence influencing these PPP projects, governance, and risk management? Any simple 1 or 2 sentence answers.
Okay, who's trying to answer that question? Private sector bidders?
So it's from the authority perspective. Let's say, okay, make it simple that Public-Private Partnership Authority, the office that you worked on,
Okay.
how do you see artificial intelligence will have impact on the governance?
Okay. To develop a sustainable business that can operate through the years and to deliver on the promises that it makes through its contract agreement, you need an agency that is fair. For example, at the issuance of the short list, all communication with any of those shortlisted bidders should be done openly, should be done in accordance with the rules and regulations applicable at that time to Bangladesh, and it's an important component that I think the private sector has more interest than the public sector does. For example, transparency is simply the rules are made available to all participants and they're followed. In other words, the executing agency, what they have put in terms of their policy or the legal or regulatory framework is really the way that they're going, not showing preference to any prospective bidder, but to do everything in a very open and transparent manner.
Okay, I'll take it as an answer. So for the time's sake, let me go to the closer section of this session. Before we move toward closing, Harold Sullivan, sir, any last word to conclude how it was as a Miswaak live sessions? How did you see it going forward? We heard from Ajad sir, he wanted to be involved in this such sessions. We will definitely make sure that our guests are there. Any final comments from you, sir?
Well, I like you. I enthusiastically wish Bangladesh the best in all of its future development objectives. And as you will note from that final report, I think Bangladesh, under the leadership of the CEO, was well positioned to do that. And I was very complimentary in the fact that they were going along well. I'm disappointed to learn that perhaps the Dhaka Chittagong Expressway is now not going to be done as a PPP, but through some other way. I haven't done my Google search on that, so I'm sorry about that. But my main thing is I'd like to leave you that it's the capacity building and institutional strengthening has to go hand in hand. And if there's any way that I can help through you, Rehan, I'd be happy to do so.
Noted, sir. Noted. Thank you very much, Sir Sullivan, for your time, wisdom, and generosity for sharing experience with us today. We are also pleased to share that whatever we have discussed today, this will be recorded in our Miswaak quarterly journal, and we will publish it. You will get a copy right away for our audience who wants to access to our future. Let me share my screen. Sorry. So, who wants to get the future publications? Please go to the www.miswaakofficial.com, and you can go to the contact section. Get the free magazines here. We have all our magazines stored here. You can get it for free. Now, as going forward, I will be sharing some industry partners mentions. So if you want, you can drop. I will start advertising my partners. Thank you everyone for joining. I will really admire the affection and interest all of you have seen, especially Sir Harold Sullivan, who has prepared the materials and shared with us. And those who have not received the materials, I will make sure that you get it right after this session ends. So thank you. Any few words from Najmus sir?
No, I wish you good luck. I think you're well intentioned in trying to
Yes,
help. Yeah.
it was out of time, so it was a very fantastic experience of having Dr. Harold Sullivan with us. It was nice time. We had enjoyed. We had learned a lot of things from him. Thanks once again to him for his contribution to our PPP and authority, as well as for still working our capacity building on us. Thank you, Professor Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, let me move on to my partners mentions. If you want, you can drop. I will keep on sharing my partners mentioned by okay. Through Amazon Japan, what we do, we share carefully selected products that support productivity and learning. We also work with Albato, which is an automation platform that helps professionals to automate their workflow without heavy coding. So details are available on our website. For those who are interested, please go to www.miswaakofficial.com. Mr. Sullivan, before we conclude, we really want to wish you all the very best, and we looking forward to have such more sessions going forward. Those who have joined in a very short notice, please accept my sincere gratitude again, and I will try to hold up such sessions going forward also. With that note, okay, so that's it. Until then, thank you. Stay well and have a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.